I just turned on the recording device, so you know that. Um,
Okay.
well, there's two things, and that's what Claudia and I really got into when we were looking at Vril and Agartha and all these different. It's really hard to penetrate those areas because there's not that much information out there, and most of it falls along the line of
Mm-hmm.
mythology. And then also, we even go into the research, go back to Egyptology, go back to Sumeria, go back into any of the ancient cultures. Most people in their mind have myth, right? They think of them as
Mm-hmm.
mythological, they think of them as stories, and they only look at them on the surface. So, by going deeper into a variety of our human story, I feel like the earth herself, Gaia Sophia, is actually revealing it to us through the hologram right now. And also on the physical, like all the discoveries that are being made right now, it's like she from her inner core self is emanating out into the field through the physical densities so that we can see who we are and how we got here. And also through the collaborative,
Absolutely.
yeah, and through the collaboration of us sharing with no limitations, right? Not sharing with an agenda, but
Mm-hmm.
just sharing to share, we're beginning to see a picture, a tapestry, but it seems like there's a message, right? And it's pretty fundamental, the message. And so for me, it's about wherever we are in consciousness is like, um, we see that in every mythology, every story, there is the light force and the dark force. There's the dark being and the light being. And depending on where you're looking at it from, are how they're interpreted. So it's like it seems to me that there's a path
Mm-hmm.
being shown to help us as humanity open our consciousness and walk out of duality and bring in the trinary aspect that Claudia talks about. And once we become trinary and we're not in duality anymore, we're not in right wrong paradigm any longer, we actually become closer to our incorruptible spiritual being that we really are.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
This so
So,
totally ties in with everything I've been studying, Christine. It's absolutely knocking my socks off
isn't it?
because, you know, all the things that I studied from a particular viewpoint, and I didn't realize until just recently how much of a lens was already chosen for me to look through. And so it is just coming together and us just really taking all of those filters off and just going for it and saying, what does the morphogenic field really telling us? And all of the answers are there.
Exactly. So, just like, what lenses did you feel like you had to remove? What beliefs or what was holding
Well,
you back from seeing through?
I I actually went through a mystery school and took a bunch of workshops and classes. And one of them was a study on the Kabbalah. It was a
Mm-hmm.
1 year study program that I participated in with several other women. And then after that year, I wanted to further my studies and went on and studied for another 2 years path working and learning to understand all of the pathways that connect the Sephiroth together. And it was all a good foundation for me, but I'm now at a completely new place. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really here's the big thing in a nutshell, Christine, that I have come to realize is that all of these systems were hijacked, every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So even the Kabbalah
Mm-hmm.
and the Tree of Life, as it is taught to thousands, if not millions around the world, was corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So what they call the Tree of Life, in my current view, is actually the tree of good and evil, duality, good and bad, the whole
Mm-hmm.
9 yards. There is a completely different tree, and it's the tree of life. That's the tree we need to be eating from.
Mm-hmm.
So all along we've been, chasing windmills. I don't know. It just blows my mind how intricate and elaborate the whole ruse or deception has been.
Right. Oh, no,
It's hard to wrap my mind around. And I've been studying this stuff my whole life.
right. So when you look at the Kabbalah, because just keeping in touch with that right now, but I agree with you totally. I mean, that's why my mind is being literally blown on a rather regular basis these days, because as I let go of conceptual belief systems, and I'm not being afraid to look at the inverse things, like you said, and just this morning, and we'll get back to that one. I had this deepest thing about the tree of good and evil, right? As being a necessary fruit to eat from. And somehow we had to eat from that, get out of the Garden of Eden, and live in this world of duality, of the separation, so that we would become knowledgeable, right? I mean, what you're not knowledgeable, until you have an experience, you're not knowledgeable. If you're in
Absolutely.
right? So if you're in the Garden of Eden, you have no knowledge of
I love
evil.
where you're going with this.
Okay. So, I mean, this
That's
is all,
right.
and so, but now, as Hazel's been, have so beautifully painted in our sessions and her visual capabilities, we're looking at the cosmic tree of life. And, that's why,
Yes.
it's the merging of those two fields, right? We've experienced the light and we've experienced the dark, or good and evil. And we're certainly in the midst of it right now on the planet, of being able to confront an evil force. But out of that merging, somehow, Lori, is my own determined, how I see it, that's exactly what we're going to use, those two opposite dynamics, to take us into the next manifestation. So I want to.
Yes. And there is a way to do that.
Okay, well, that's why I wanted to ask you more.
And that's what we're all doing.
Yeah, so what do you see when you look at the Kabbalah
for
in that
me,
nature?
Okay, what I see when I look at the Kabbalah is that I was taught that there are 32 paths of wisdom. There's the 10 spheres and the 22 pathways, which adds up to 32. And then if you look at the tree, there's Thoth right below Keter at the top. And it's just below the abyss, sort of, in the diagrams. And there are no pathways connecting to it, none.
Exactly.
And so I've always wondered about that. And so when I did a little bit of research, I came up with a whole bunch of interesting things.
Right. Okay, so there's no pathway to, what is it called again? I'm so not Kabbalah-ish, but.
Thoth. It's spelled Daath.
Okay, so that's the very bottom of it.
No, it's at the top of the tree, just below Keter. There's the very top sphere, which is I don't know if I pronounce them right, and I know pronunciation is important, but anyway, there's Keter at the top, and then just below that, there's a sphere called Thoth, and it's completely, they just don't really talk about it much. There's some information out there, but you'll discover that most of it can trace back to one individual, which should actually raise a lot of eyebrows, really, and that is Aleister Crowley.
Okay.
And so there's many different ways I could go with this, but just briefly, if you add that sphere into the mathematics here, it means there's actually 33 paths, which doesn't that number sound familiar?
The hidden one, okay.
Yes, and then you have, that's 3 times 11. And then I went all over the place. I haven't even really gathered all my thoughts, but then, I got the Torah and in the Hebrew version and actually looked myself to see if this particular code that I'd heard about was actually true. And it is there. Anybody can go look and see this for themselves. So there's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And Genesis and Exodus, if you go in there and you start with the first letter, and then I believe it is skip 49. Is that right?
Yeah.
And look at the letter. It'll spell out Torah, Torah. They leave out the A.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot to do with the Hebrew alphabet and how they use it. And then also in the middle one, Leviticus, it spells out Yahweh every 7 letters. And then it spells out Torah in the Numbers and Deuteronomy only backwards, going the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just this whole thing of numbers. So if you do the numerology on both Yahweh and Torah, it ends up being 28, which is, it comes out to 1. But it's also 7. 7 really plays in there very, very prominently. Anyway, where I'm going with this is that we've been looking at AI. And I think you've already covered that when we refer to this particular predatory AI that we're all trying to wrap our minds around, that we're looking at something, we call it artificial because it's trying to mimic biological life forms and the spirits inhabiting them. It's trying to infiltrate, it's doing something that's not natural for us, I guess. But I would venture to say there are many different types of intelligences. Not all are biological. Even we and the Earth herself have components that are not biological, that exist outside of this form that we inhabit.
Right.
So anyway, so this artificial intelligence, we talked about it maybe, like a program, and what is a program? They use zeros and ones. It's binary.
Exactly.
And so you can actually start to break this all down and realize what this whole Kabbalah and Tree of Life, which is actually not the Tree of Life, it's a Tree of Duality, is teaching people. It's teaching people all the things that we have been talking about, which is the whole Hegelian, I don't know how do you say that, but is it Hegelian dialectic, where there's always two opposing opposites.
Right.
That generates a lot of energy. You got to wonder where that's going. And they say, when I was doing some research, that Doth is actually the doorway to the backside of the tree.
Right. Go for it. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah.
I'm tracking something very similar, but go ahead.
There's a number of different, it's called a Qliphoth. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's spelled Qliphoth, which is the inverse or the backside of the tree. So I can't remember where my notes are.
I pulled up the
because it's a lot of information.
Okay, so just so you know, Lori, along with this, if we make a post out of it or something, we'll put all the links into the research you're doing. So, and I do remember that, and so
that's good.
Yeah. So on the other side, you've got
so
the back side of the tree, which
yes,
which I love, is because it's like I've had this thing in consciousness, and we were saying that, Claudia and I, that we need to turn it around and look at something from the inverse side to get closer to the truth. Like,
absolutely.
Okay, so I love it. I love it because it's like we haven't talked about this, and yet we all seem to be looking at some intelligent fields directing our sight right now to study it from that perspective. So,
yes.
Yeah, so please say what you do know, because this is one area I've never gone into myself. Only like I've glanced at it and go,
well,
yeah.
It's good to actually look at a picture of the Kabbalah as most people are used to seeing it today.
Right, and I'm looking at one right now.
Because then you can see where Doth is located.
Right.
Okay. So then they say that the backside of the tree is how you must enter to the lower world, or the world of the dead. So, or all that is unseen, from this world. And it's kind of interesting because I even had trouble remembering every time I went to go look this up on the internet for several days. I think about it when I meditate, and then remember what it was that was so important for me to look up. So it, to me, is almost like something doesn't want us to look at this.
Yep.
That's what I get.
Yep.
Definitely, I would get the same thing, right?
Well, so just a little bit here. It's the cliff off is said to be a negative entropic force, which is basically a force that drives people towards death, and it literally lives off the life force energy that is generated by biological life forms. And it's also called the shell or the husk of that which was alive, that which is cast off.
Wow. Do you remember? Do you remember the session?
Really
Were
cast
you
off skin.
Were you in that session with Hazel?
Oh yes,
And
yes.
What did Hazel say?
Oh my God!
Her impression of
How
Saturn.
come my head tingling?
It was a husk, that hollowed out husk. That's what she.
Oh my word! So see, so many little clues where they're just all over the place.
Right, and
we are allowing ourselves to actually look at it and see where it goes without any fetters or anything holding us back.
Exactly.
This is what it takes to get there.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I'm so excited. So go on. I'm taking notes as you go here and just putting dots together.
There were two particular websites in particular, and I'll give you those later. But the other one, it talked about Aleister Crowley, how his little group are the ones that actually developed many of the ideas of the Kabbalah using Jewish mysticism to basically create their own system. And there's also a relationship to the Sephra as being wormholes or portals, which is basically the same thing. And so it goes back to Thoth. You know, they are the ones that are able to use that entryway, but it's been shut off. There's no pathways connecting to it for everyone else. That's by design.
Right.
They purposely did that. It did not used to be that way.
Right. So I'm just throw this out here because I'm listening to a man named Gerald Clark, who's done a lot of study of the Emerald Tablets. He speaks of the doorway of Thoth, right? And that Thoth is showing the way through Thoth, and it fits in with what I understood looking at the Nordic traditions, okay, and looking at the Tree of Life, that in a way to freedom is through hell.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Hell.
Right. And it took another turn for me, Lori, only in my consciousness of saying, right, because as we walk through hell as a fire, okay, a crucible, if you will, with everything that's there that we have to confront, it's only by the purification process of that we're actually allowed out or into a deep.
Would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Oh, okay. So yeah. And I'm looking at Thoth right now in the Kabbalah, and it has enumerated knowledge. I mean, that's how right. So going back to our,
it's also connected to. It's also connected. Each of the Sephra or Sephra are assigned a planetary correspondence. So you have each side of the tree. On the right, there's if I hopefully have this right,
I'm looking at
you have the Pillar of Mercy. So you have the Pillar of Mercy, and it's associated at the top with Hokmah, which is Neptune, and then below that is Hesed, which is associated with Jupiter, and then Netzach, which is associated with Venus.
Right.
So if you kind of know those, associations with those planets, it'll kind of give you the flavor of each of those.
Right.
And then on the other side, on the left side, you have the Pillar of Severity.
Right.
And you have Bina at the top, which is associated with Saturn. And that's limitations, all of those types of things. And then Gabora, which is associated with Mars. And then Hod, which is associated with Mercury. And so the way it is taught, it's taught that the right side is the pillar mercy and the left side is the pillar of severity. But then it's like everything is inverse because they also separated these into male and female energies.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to almost start to look at this as everything is backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, if you begin to work with Thoth and add that into the tree and begin creating pathways to her, that will take you through that doorway. And not only that, it then allows you to access that tree of life,
Mm-hmm.
which then becomes trinary,
Exactly.
a trinary
Oh,
intellectual field.
Right. So Doth is
I hope I
numerate.
explained that right.
You did a beautiful job. So Doth, okay, I'm looking at it, is the circle of knowledge, which is ruled by Sirius, which is interesting,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
right? And the only path that links
Yes,
to
it
Doth
is.
actually is the abyss. It's the level of the abyss that sits between.
Yes.
It sits between the reality and abyss.
It's the void.
Yep.
It's the void.
So
Which is so interesting because they tried to cut off our access to the void, and yet they keep it for themselves. I really feel this is how all those dark magicians have been sort of controlling this holographic dreamscape we're all experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they use our energy to fuel it, but then we don't have access to it.
Right. Well,
Well, that's their intention anyway.
Right, exactly. I think we have access to it now. But right, that's how they.
Yes, I think so.
Right, and so yeah, I mean the terms that come up because I you know how I get sort of poetic and metaphorical in a way, but it's like there's two ways to be blind. One is to be blinded by the light. That means the reality that we look at every day. It blinds us to what's behind it, or we're blinded by the dark. Which is fear. On one level, the abyss that everybody's so afraid of. I mean, Claudia and I were talking about this in our recent talk, was that, fear is the primary thing, or don't look here. Don't look here. It's scary. It's ugly. It's full of demons. It's this, it's that, right? We all tend to think of the dark realms as being demonic.
Yes, exactly.
And yet, in a way,
We are taught.
Yeah, we're taught that. And in a way, if we really look at the demonics that are guarding that dark realm, it is in a way through our own knowledge that we have to walk through the demonic plane. In other words, we have to conquer our own demons to be able to walk through there. So they, in some sort of strange way, they serve a purpose, because just any consciousness that had the keys to life, or if I'm thinking of the Ankh, even as you're talking, Lori, that image comes to me. The Egyptian Thoth, and I'm thinking of that.
They're connected.
Right, so I'm thinking of it as being a consciousness that actually can create matter out of nothing. Now, that has to be reserved in the higher planes for only those that have pureness of consciousness. Right, so I can see that there is a demonic plane and it actually has a purpose, which is a whole nother way of understanding it for me. Anyways, I mean, I don't have to conquer demons. I need to be able to walk invisible through that plane, or come light enough myself in my own indivisibility or incorruptible. And that's what you're saying, is that trinary aspect of us out of the duality. We have to be able to consciously get out of duality.
Oh yeah, there's no way around it.
Right? So it's just fascinating. It's fascinating, Lori. I mean, I'm looking at the Kabbalah now and I'm going, okay, what do we understand about this? What is it really showing us? So what you're saying, Lori, just to recap, is that people that study the Kabbalah right now are shown only the front side. You would say that in most people that study the Kabbalah, okay? And so it seems like a maze, a labyrinth, or a maze that there's no way out of.
That's as it's intended.
Okay.
But not its original intention.
No.
I feel it was altered on purpose.
Okay. Do you have any?
Like everything else.
Exactly. So where do you feel?
Well, if you look at some of the early pioneers in this, Aleister Crowley, there's tons of names that you can look up And you'll see that McGregor, Mathers, I believe, there's a whole bunch. Most of them were extremely narcissistic and egotistical, and most of them kind of went nuts
Right.
studying this. So that's another way they've scared people off. And most people think, well, you can go read a book. That's how you learn about Kabbalah. But actually, how you learn about Kabbalah is totally introspective.
Mhm.
It's totally going within, realizing that Thoth exists in each and every one of us. All you have to do is access that hidden door. They may have put some big boogeyman in front of it. They're just imaginary. We can all walk through that door. The knowledge is accessible to everyone.
Mhm. So the keys lie within yourself to unlock it. Another way of saying that.
That's right. You don't have to be fearful about studying all of these different systems, which is what they try to do. So say they take any good people that want to learn about it and they push them away with fear tactics, then all the negatively oriented people, well, they flock to it because, you know, it does give you certain abilities. It's just that they're not coming from yourself, they're coming from somewhere else.
Right. Or even good people.
That's just my sense of it.
Yeah. Or even
Oh,
with
absolutely.
good people that study it because they're not given the real keys, okay? They're not
That
really.
was a generality,
Yeah.
you know, from my studies of, you know,
Right. But those that
back
find.
in the early 1900s when this was being studied.
Right.
It's changed a lot since then.
So no, I mean, I really.
Tons of people are discovering this.
But that's what I mean. I mean, just like using it in the sense that it has a dual purpose, right? It scares you from it, okay?
Yes, it does.
Or if you actually, I mean, see, here you go when you use the example of Aleister Crowley or any of these other beings that really started to understand it, they wanted it for power. They weren't using
Yes.
it as consciousness, right? So using it for power will lead to your absolute destruction, ultimately, because you really can't pass through the keyhole. You can gather power from it and power over, but I don't think you can pass through that keyhole without a purification process.
Well, I think it's even more than that. I think it's really, it really, the key really is in how you approach it and realizing that all can be accessed through your own intuition. That you don't have to look to, you know, you can take the basic structure and then simply meditate on those images in your own way and trust what your inner self is telling you. You don't have to have someone else tell you what it means.
Right.
Because even my path working that I did for 2 years, I paid someone else to tell me what it means. Not that that wasn't valuable. I appreciated it. I learned a lot from it. But ultimately, I had to go even beyond that to get to the place where I am in my understanding now,
So
which obviously is still going to change. But
no, but it's beautiful. So really
yes,
what you're saying is like collect the knowledge, right? I mean, we need the data, we need to, whatever attracts us, whether we're studying astrology or the Kabbalah or any of these other pathways that have been laid out there, they all hold keys. They all are structures around a certain amount of knowledge, but then the real challenge is how do you actually within yourself read those fields of intelligence. I mean, because when you think of a planet or your astrological chart or any of those things, eventually you get to the point of it comes through your own intuitive knowing. I mean, that becomes truth. I mean, that's the only way I know to describe for myself what truth is. It has to ring true to me.
Absolutely.
And you know, I value every person that ever, you know, opened a door for me or showed me something or introduced me to or any studies that I've also done. You know, and so if we look at the Kabbalah, it's just another, well, it's a very primary one actually, diagram of the you said it. What did you call it? That we're in, right? Like we're in because you started out with talking about the simulation, the reality, the holographic reality.
Holographic dreamscape.
Right? So it's a morphogenic.
To me, it's like a holographic dreamscape. Yes.
Okay, right.
One of many.
Exactly. So really, if we were to look at it from a kind of a funny position, but you know, like this is a major video game, right? That was designed, right? And it is going through this simulation, I want to call it, or holograph, that we find what we need to find. We
Well,
discover what we need to discover. I
to
guess
me, it kind of all ties together. You know, you've got the diagram of the tree of life. If you actually kind of intuitively fill it in a little more, you know, it almost feels more balanced. You know, I'd encourage you to do that. And then, you know, there's also the realization that this diagram fits perfectly within the flower of life image, you know, which is how cells divide.
Mhm.
And so actually this diagram, you can almost visualize it in every cell of your body. And then, of course, the Sephira are all spheres. And for me, I still see the hologram is like spheres within spheres, and they're all interconnected.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so we're in just one bubble, and then we have our individual bubbles. And so it's all connected.
Hmm.
I think once you begin to connect that up inside yourself, it kind of holographically radiates out to the whole.
Mhm.
Makes sense to me anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so say that in another way. Like,
So
okay, so when we connect all of these spheres that are us on that inner
mhm.
plane journey, when we integrate, then because we know that we're being right now, currently, humanity is being usurped or used to project a reality from this predator that you started speaking of first, right? So that
Mhm.
agenda to bring or merge humanity with the machine, all right, or whatever. So when you're not
Mhm.
awake, you're not in an aware state of consciousness or an amplified or expanded consciousness. You're just being used. You're just a cog in a wheel, right? That's generating a reality.
Yes.
And so as we move into a quantum field reality of ourself and our own inner understanding, we actually move in an interaction in the quantum field at a different level of creation.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Is that I'm trying to find words for.
It does. It's a hard topic to describe because I see it in images in my mind, and I try to put those images into words.
Bring an image in, because I think it's really
So
important to have images.
it's like when you enter Doth, as each person learns to do that, it's like they likened it to a wormhole. And to me, that's what
Mhm.
takes you into your subconscious terrain where
Mhm.
many of the answers lie, not just all the other stuff, but I mean, a whole bunch of the stuff that pertains to you. You
Mhm.
know, that's what I've discovered in there. And that helps me. It's like brings that whole image more into a balanced field.
Mhm.
It feels better. You know, it's like whatever they took out or disconnected, you can, once you begin to reconnect that, you access that. It's like the iceberg. You see the tip, and there's this huge, you know, thing under the water you don't even see. Well, that's like when you go through Doth, you open up that whole dreamscape that's been created that you co-created, but that you weren't aware of. And
Mhm.
so, you know, you can bring that information back and thereby become more holistic in your everyday life experience instead of just it being funneled into one. You know, what they've tried to do to us is funnel it into one way of looking at things. Everybody's got to think the same. Don't ask questions. You know, instead you're doing the opposite. You're
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
you're opening that Pandora's box
Okay. So I'm
and
going to
saying,
use.
I know there's some good stuff in there. It isn't all bad.
Right. The Pandora's box thing keeps coming up too. We'll get into that at some point. So with my eyes closed, Lori, as you're speaking, okay, this is what I see. Okay. I see that funnel vortex energy that
Mhm.
goes deep inside because we've experienced that, right? And as I go through
Mhm. Yes.
that center point, okay, I'm naming it Doth right now. What I start to see is that there's a
Mhm.
spherical expansion of consciousness that comes through that. So now I'm in the
Mhm.
subterranean. I'm not on the surface level any longer. I'm not in the 2D reality. I'm now in a spherical shaped type of hologram. That's the only way I can describe it because I'm listening
Mhm.
to you, and that's what I'm seeing on my inner plane.
You're describing exactly. You're doing very well. That's exactly how it
Mhm.
is. How I
Mhm.
experience
And
it.
it could even be interpreted as a torus.
And so You are the center of that circle. So you're not a coordinate somewhere in somebody else's circle. You are the center of that circle. You are the navigator. It's a
Exactly.
totally different orientation.
Exactly. It's so beautiful, right? So you are
Yeah.
located, you just located yourself. In other words, you're not in somebody else. You just located yourself by that act, which I've said so many times is like locate yourself in time and space. That is your location, and it's an eternal time and space, by the way. But, anyways, so once you've located that, I love what you just said. I want to say it again. You're not part of somebody else's reality at that point. You're not being usurped, used. You've identified yourself as
That's
your
right.
own divine sovereign self.
It's totally empowering.
That's beautiful. Beautiful, Lori.
Wow.
And so
It's hard to put this to words. It
yeah,
really is.
it's,
I
it's
struggle with it all the time because I see things in images. And so
yeah, well, it is very
I think
difficult.
that's how we all really communicate before they used spelling and words.
Exactly.
Right. What did I say earlier today, Claudia? I said to you, I said, well, I said, it's like, I realize that part of my function, okay, part of what my ability or capability or reason is to dispel.
Mm-hmm.
Means to take the words apart, undo the spell. And yet we are still in this reality locked into using words because we haven't quite made the bridge yet where the telepathic communication
right.
is beyond the words. And we're doing it. I see it. I can visualize that. That is really in my visual field. The neural connective, yeah.
I see a hand reaching out for ours. Really, I see something from that realm that has been waiting, and it's literally got its hand out waiting for us to grab it.
And part of it is, and this is, we all have been saying this in our own way, it's like we go through this keyhole, okay? We have these perceptual realities. We look through into the dark subconscious realms that have been kept from us, and we bring it back into this reality. And so it's almost, until we get to the place where it's enough of a frequency change in the material realm of the reality we're living in, then it'll become more our normal. Right now we have to keep reaching for it. Because there's something that I feel intuitively. It's not like I'm not in that space that you just described, Lori. It's like, but it's bringing it enough down into this density level that we start vibrating the whole, first our own body, our own realities around us, but this whole reality will start on a different vibratory frequency. And there's so many out there doing that right now.
It kind of reminds me of looking through a telescope. If you look through a telescope, even if you're looking at the moon, you have to be very still. Any movement will make that image go out of focus, or you won't be able to see it anymore. And so it really takes some practice. And it feels like we're changing, but not only that, as things are shifting and moving around, because everything is, we've got the moon going around the earth going around the sun, all of the planets all moving at different rates of speed. And they're not just going around in a circle, they're going up and down. And then actually they're all also in the spiral arm of the galaxy, all moving along with that great big toroidal spiral that we call the Milky Way galaxy. So yes, it's all toroidal. Even they described that in one of the links that I looked at on the ClickUp, is that there is a toroidal aspect to the tree. So it's all connected.
Definitely.
So there's just so much to look at there, isn't there?
Well, definitely. I mean, I've got the Seraphoth and the Clip-Off open, right? And I'm looking at the inverse side of the tree right now. And, it brings a lot of...
Oh, yeah. And they all have, if you look at it, they actually broke it down into different, each of the Sephira on the other side have attributes that are
Mhm.
like the inverse of the front side of the tree.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
they keep the back side of the tree hidden,
Mhm.
and that's where it's all at,
Mhm. Mhm.
hidden from our view.
Mhm.
There's like the deceivers, I can't remember what all. There's a whole list of them.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
have it in front of me.
I only have names here, and it's kind of a blurry image right now, but I think,
Hmm.
it would be really good to put this all out there and put out some of these images and really sit with these energies exactly. What is this really?
Well, I'm definitely going to post some information on the EE forum
Okay.
covering this, because I think the images will really help people understand, what it is we're talking
Mhm.
about.
Mhm. Wow.
A lot of thought went into this.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, Lori, just to, I feel like I'm reiterating, but I wasn't speaking with you. I was speaking with Claudia, and that's part of the video we put out. But this is something that I felt really important to say, and it bears repeating. Those of us that embrace our heart mind, the resonant center of divine love, and yet that other aspect
Hmm.
of us is the mind, right? And there are levels of mind
Hmm.
also, right? There's a confused, co-opted, parasited mind, right? But there's another mind, and you can
Hmm.
call it a super mind, right? Which is like an expanded use of mind. And so I
Hmm.
just am using that now because my attention is being drawn to that, right? I can only describe it as a vibration. Our minds have been so co-opted and so controlled through beliefs and all the other things. But when the mind starts to clear
Hmm.
the fields, right? When the mind becomes a clear field itself, its perceptual abilities are infinite.
Oh,
And
yeah.
right? And so, it's like that's another thing that I think the co-opting of the New Age movement has been is like it's all about heart energy, it's all about love on an absolute level, yes, but we're actually a divinely we have a divine vessel here. We might as well try to use it to the best of within our capabilities. Turn ourselves back on. Turn our avatars back on.
Here's an illustration that comes to mind for me.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story about an elephant who's always been tied to a short chain on his back leg, and since early, right after birth, as soon as they could do that. And after a while, it grew up into a big elephant, and it still had this little tiny chain. And then one day, the chain rusted out and broke, and he was so used to being on that chain, he didn't even know
Mm-hmm.
that he was free.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we're at now. Some of us it's like the gate's open, we've been in the pen, but we don't know we can go through the gate yet. And so some of us are bravely going up to the edge of the gate going, I think it's safe to go out now. And so that's what we have to do. We have to just really realize that the sky's the limit. There is no limit. There is no limit, because once again, it goes back to this whole topic of artificial intelligence. Okay, there are many different kinds of intelligence, and each of us has a component of herself, in my mind, that is independent of this physical body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, if you're talking about, it's non-biological,
Mm-hmm.
it is out of time,
Yeah.
and it's immortal.
Mm-hmm.
So we can really go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So how do you tie that back into artificial intelligence? Just to link that back to what you started to say. I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but trying. I mean, this is a.
That's what pretty much we were talking about duality. So a
Mm-hmm.
binary program, I think Claudia even said this, and Kara St. Louis, she talks about it too, is it can't even go where a trinary system can go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
It just doesn't have the capability.
Mm-mm. Right. Okay. Beautiful.
So, in other words, we don't have to fight an enemy. We just have to access who and what we really are to our fullest potential, and the problem goes away. I mean, I know it
Yeah.
sounds very simplistic.
No, but I so
uh,
totally agree with you that
yeah.
it is really that simple.
Hmm.
Mhm. Isn't that beautiful, though? I mean, because,
Yes.
and that's something we've been trained away from. Simple,
Yes, exactly.
Right.
right?
Oh, they built this huge, complex, multi-layered whatever, it's like an endless playground they want to keep us locked into.
Mhm.
Except for the playground's got some not so fun areas. So, and plus, I'm getting kind of tired of being in their playground.
Yep. You're not alone in that, that's for sure. Wow. No, you've, all of it's an interesting thing, Lori, because like deciphering this is, it's like moving through a density, it's a very dense field to,
Hmm.
to remove the beliefs, the traps, all of those things. And yet by voicing it, we actually do that. And so, well,
That's
thank
right.
you so much. Um, we were in our session this morning, which was really more of another conversation. We decided that when we end, let's just,
Hmm.
the three of us sit in silence together
Okay.
and just hold this field as a reality as we see it. Beautiful. And the thought that came with that, or the visual that I had, is like, now that we have found the third particle, or the trinary self, we'll start moving into different dimensions. I could see something forming there. Just the three of us
Hmm.
are forming something by
It's the
sitting
bridge
together.
that,
Mhm,
oh, absolutely.
mhm.
I saw a pillar coming up through the center, and at the top, it almost looked like droplets of water coming out of a geyser. I don't know, like bluish
Mhm.
colored, coming up, like coming
Beautiful.
up out of the earth. I don't know.
That's beautiful. See, those are
But
things.
I think it's kind of like what Jeffrey talks about, how we really literally are with our consciousness by allowing this process to unfold, creating that bridge
Mhm,
that makes it easier and easier for all to travel.
mhm. And as our friend Jeffrey just said, oh yeah, he just wrote something for us. Yeah, absolutely right. We are really creating the bridge, and I will say that there is no doubt in me, and this is a work of no doubt. It's just like getting free enough
It's an
ourselves.
honor to
Isn't it?
participate.
It's an
Yes, absolutely.
it's an
Yes,
honor, and it's awesome. Yeah.
yes, it
Well,
is.
so thank you, Lori. That was just
Well, thank both of you, lovely ladies.
okay. Take
I'm
care.
sure we'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Thank you,
No doubt about
Laurie.
that. Okay. Blessings, love. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye now.
Same to you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.